Part 1, Chapter 3, in the Derech Hashem. Now this is divided into letters. This is Hey or paragraph 5 in the English. And here he goes through something which I've hinted to you, but now we're going to see it in detail. I'll just paraphrase it roughly as we go along, and then we'll explain it. One of the things you need to know, and take into account, is that humanity is not in a condition now like the condition it was in when man was first created. A great change has taken place. And this is what happened as a result of the transgression of Adam, of course, and Chava, eating from the tree of knowledge. There was a gigantic change in the world and in the people, their condition, and their not the level of spirituality, but the mode in which spirituality is expressed, what the challenges are, that all changed to a great extent. So that means whenever you see a statement about mankind, you have to think, what is the author talking about? Is he talking about the way mankind was created? Or is he talking about the present state of mankind? And by the way, I have a former student in Toronto who pointed out to me many years ago, people sometimes lose sight of this fact. They'll ask, why did God create a world with so much evil in it? Death and injury and disease and disaster and the pressures, poverty. The short answer is, he didn't. He didn't create that world. In the Garden of Eden, none of this was true. No death, no injury, no disease, no poverty, no work to do. It was eternal springtime. They didn't need garments. Food was growing freely. So God created a world without all these evils that people worry about. How can God make a world like this? You want to know where those evils came from? We made that world. All you could ask is, why did God make a world which, if we fail, turns into that world? We could ask that question. But to attribute directly the things that we suffer to God's agency is just not correct, historically not correct. So you have to be careful when you talk about mankind. Which state are you talking about, before the transgression or after transgression? Now, you're going to explain what man was like before and what happened and what the consequences are. When man was first created, his condition was the perfect expression of what we said about free will. He's a compound of two parts which are opposite in their nature, which are the soul and the body. And in the world, there are things which contribute to good and things which contribute to evil, perfection and deficiency. And he stands balanced between them. That means the motivation for each side has equal power. To join himself to either one, this is something we didn't have before, the idea of Dvekus, being connected to, attached to. We talked about being connected and attached to God, that that's the purpose of all creation. But now he's telling you that he can be connected to or attached to the material side. Now this is a further expression of what we saw a couple of times ago, that when the body and soul, which have opposite orientation, one towards the spiritual, one towards the physical. So we said that the outcome of a decision is either that the soul decides to assert itself in control of the body, to compel the body to do what the soul knows is right to do, in which case the soul is strengthened by its decision, and the body is elevated, as he will describe in the next paragraph, by the decision, so that the body becomes more soul-like. We talked about the 5 stages, and before you get to ultimate Ba. And that means that the soul and the body, which becomes an ally of the soul, can attach itself to God. That's what we spoke about, and that's a fairly common idea. Now he's at least hinting at the opposite. What happens if the soul makes the wrong decision? So the wrong decision, as we said, was to relinquish control of the body. The soul never decides to do evil. It just, the mistake that it makes is to relinquish control of the body. Oh ho! So you take the reins off the body like a wild horse, and the body goes on its own. Well, the body goes on its own and acts in terms of the physical and only the physical, and it drags the soul down with it. To the extent where the body, which is itself an expression of the physical and is at home in the physical, can drag the soul down to the point where the soul becomes attached to the physical. Just like when it chooses correctly, the body becomes attached through the soul to God, so when it decides incorrectly and allows the body freedom to do as it pleases, that pulls the soul down so that the soul together with the body can be attached to the physical. And that's what leads to annihilation. When it gets too far in that direction, there's no spirituality left. It just ends up being annihilated. So that's what he's standing in between. And it would have been appropriate for him, of course, to choose the good, to give the soul its power over the body, and his intellect over materiality, and then he would have become perfected, and then he would have rested. In other words, there was one performance, just one performance, and that was, don't eat from the tree of knowledge, although some say that that had a flip side of yes, eating from the other trees of the garden. That was also a mitzvah, but that's all. Now he said that's all, but boy, what an easy job. He had it all in one shot, one simple commandment. But the Zohar tells us that that's a gross oversimplification. That what we have split up into 613 commandments, all that was rolled up into the one commandment of not eating from the tree of knowledge. Now, if you say, isn't that impossible to understand? How can you say that? One is in 613. But if you think, for example, of complicated situations in life, which you're familiar with, you know very well that one decision might have in it all sorts of dimensions. Let's take, for example, breaking a promise to someone who you owe gratitude to. You made a promise. No, so there's the profit you get from breaking the promise. There's the fact that the person you broke the promise to is going to treat you now as someone untrustworthy. Then there's also the contribution to the building of your own character. Whatever it is you went after, instead of keeping the promise, now becomes something that you're more attached to, and you probably shouldn't be attached to it. So there's that thing. Your parents find out about it, they're going to be terribly disappointed with you. And your parents have a tremendous stake in your success, so you're hurting them as well. And all of a sudden, but it's just one thing, I promised to take him to the laundry and I'm not doing it. No, it's not one thing. It has all sorts of ramifications. What about your self-image? You know you broke a promise. You know that's not right, so then you get down on yourself. So one decision can have in it many, many different dimensions. Now, what we're being told is that on the level of Adam, the one commandment, so to speak, of not eating from the tree of knowledge, had in it multiple dimensions, and it made it for him a kind of complex, compound performance that would achieve the total perfection of mankind. He and she being the only examples of mankind. If they made that decision correctly, so then that would have been over. The test of mankind would have been over, and then the process of going to the world to come would have started. They would have had no more choices to make, no more free will, no more struggle. That one choice contained within it the totality of the achievement of human perfection. One of the consequences of failure is that challenge became divided up, multiply divided up, and each person who's alive today has a narrow slice of that challenge, and we're counting now on there's a wonderful word for this in the contemporary language. It's called crowdsourcing, right? The achievement now is going to be the sum total of the efforts of this tremendous number of people, each person carrying a small part of the burden. Yeah, your question.
Does that mean that the taiva to make the initial transgression was stronger? Was like a compound of all the 613 mitzvot, the taiva of all the 613?
Okay, first of all, you're using the word taiva, which roughly means desire. I don't know if that's the right word to use here. You're using it as if it was a universal solvent. When it's something bad, that's a taiva to do something bad. But we have many different categories of motivation for evil. Taiva v'kina v'kavod, in that same Mishnah, mentions jealousy or competition and honor. It says each one of the three can lead a person in the wrong direction. And there are more. So don't use taiva as if it's the be-all and end-all of negative motivation. It's one of the things that leads people astray. And I think also you should, which is now a very general term for lots and lots of different features of your psychology. Yetzer hara, evil inclination. And also don't give a one-sided picture. Yes, there was a gigantic motivation for doing the evil, but there's also a gigantic motivation for doing the good, because he could appreciate what the accomplishment would be. He could appreciate what was being offered to him.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking. Did it match? Because
well, that's what he said. It's balanced.
It's balanced.
It's balanced, right?
So it was like the entire Yetzer hara for 613 mitzvah was also there, and then there was the reward for 613 mitzvah.
That's right. And the self-perfection, it was balanced, and that's the perfect condition of choice. Now, if you think about it, let me just expand that just a little bit. Why is 50-50 so important? Again, I'm so careful now because there's so many things to keep in mind. It's important, but it's not crucial because we don't live in that world, as you'll see. We don't live in a 50-50 world. But it's important because what you want from the decision is two things. You want it to be the person's own choice, but you want, on the one hand, that he should be fully responsible. And if, for example, the decision was very hard, let's say that in comparison of strength, the evil inclination has a strength of 80 and the good inclination has a strength of 20, so then if he fails, you say, well, that's not a big failure. Look at the obstacle he was facing. The deck was stacked against him. So, and on the other hand, if it's 80-20 in favor of the good inclination, they say, well, it was trivial, it was easy, because, he had everything going for him. So that's why 50-50, you want to be fully responsible with no excuse on the one hand, and yet that his accomplishment should be a real accomplishment on the other hand. In order to have that, it's got to be 50-50. And as you will see in the next paragraph, we don't live in that world. We don't live in a 50-50 world.
That's due to the transgression.
And it's due to the transgression, as you'll see. Okay, so now that's where he was, and that's what he should have done. Now, furthermore, he says, I want you to understand something about the soul. We appreciate the soul as a kind of life force. If you ever see someone die, they're alive and then they're dead. Nothing dramatic happens, like sudden bleeding or shriveling, or they're just alive and they're not alive. They don't lose any weight. It's just living and they're not living. So we understand that there's some element attached to the body which accounts for its life. And when we talk about death, what we mean is the exiting of the soul from the body, departing, maybe exiting is from, not exiting inside, but departing from the body. It's the interaction between soul and body that maintains life. And once they're not interacting anymore, so then the body dies. And the soul, as we said, goes into a waiting pattern for later developments. Now, the truth is, he says, a lot more is going on than that. We're just not aware of it. We have life and also intellect, because human intellect for us is something that the soul does, and we are aware of it because it's not material. If you, someday maybe I have it recorded, a whole series of lectures on why you can't say that the mind is the brain. It's discussed a lot in contemporary philosophy, and there are very good philosophers who hold that position. If you're under the impression that philosophers are materialists and think everything is only the physical world, that's not true. There are many like that, but there are very good ones who are not like that at all. At any rate, we recognize that. But he says, in truth, there's a lot going on more than that. And one of them is that the interaction with the soul can elevate and change the body. We spoke about this. So that we have 5 stages of the body. Our body, which is physically dependent and physical expression. And then we gave the example of Moses on Mount Sinai, where he didn't eat, he didn't drink, and he didn't sleep for 40 days and 40 nights, 3 times. And we said he didn't lose any weight. The world's most effective crash diet. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink for 40 days and nights. Didn't lose any weight at all. Why? Because his soul was absorbing Torah. And when the soul is absorbing Torah, that nourishes the body if you're not living in our world. In our world, the physical body needs food, period. But he was out of our world. He was a step above our world. There, the body responded to the fact that the soul's receiving spiritual nourishment. Now, there are 3 levels above that, to the point where the body in the world to come becomes something so soul-like that it accompanies, becomes an ally of the soul. It's identified with the soul. It's just a different aspect of the soul. And therefore, it joins the soul in being attached to God. So now, how does that happen? How does that happen? It's the operation of the soul on the body that is supposed to produce that gradual transformation. So the scenario, which was the ideal, was for Adam to face this challenge. He faces the challenge because he is a compound of soul and body. That's why he faces this challenge. Page 48. At least in this edition. It's not saying. It's part 1, chapter 3, O Zion. He's in a situation where he has free will. He has free will because it's 50-50. And then had he made the right decision, his free will would have been finished, but that free will decision would have strengthened his soul. And then the strengthened soul can then operate on the body so as to raise it level by level to the point where it becomes just a facet of the soul and can join the soul in connection to God. That's what should have happened. That was the plan. Now, this is what would have happened had he not sinned. And his soul would have purified the body step by step. But since he sinned, there are various consequences which now set up the dynamics of our world. This way, get an insight into why our world works the way it does. First of all, there are many greater deficiencies in the world than there were when he was created. And the way that's necessary to rectify it became much more difficult than it was before. Now, I'll give you just, he says this in some detail, but I'll give you a picture of what's going on here. We said a couple of times already, when he defines serving God, he says you turn to God and then desire and attempt to become closer and attached to God. And we asked, why do you have to turn? If you tell me the first step is to turn, then I say, oh, so I'm pointing in the wrong direction. No, why am I pointing in the wrong direction? Because I'm absorbed in the material world. And since I'm absorbed in the material world's job is to hide God's presence. You don't see God in the material world. So in order to start serving God, you have to detach your focus from the material, to turn towards the spiritual, and then you can seek ways to draw closer to God. But that turning is the first step. How hard is it to turn? How much are we absorbed into the physical? What creates that absorption into the physical? Well, here are some features of our lives after the Chet which create this absorption. First of all, you're born as a baby, totally material. You have no understanding, no free will, no concept of what's good. You just have your needs. And you are programmed by God's grace to behave in such a way as to drive your parents to insanity if you don't get what you want. You cry and you scream and you kick, and sometimes you hold your breath and pass out, and the parents know you better give him what he wants. Otherwise, you'll have no peace, and you'll yourself will be driven insane. And then, little by little, the child grows up and gains more abilities, and can finally is old enough and strong enough to take away the toys from his younger brother, and to break things. Well, children, when they're sitting in their high chairs, right, the first thing is to become great scientists. They experimented with gravity. If I let go, what happens? Bang! Crash! Oh, that's great. Let's try another one. Right? Where's this to Adam? Adam was created as an adult with free will, understanding, prophecy. God spoke to him, 50-50. The baby, the growing child, is nothing like that at all. So the material side has years and years of advance over the spiritual side, which develops very slowly. Number one. Number two, as we said, Garden of Eden was paradise. There was no physical pursuits that were necessary. Well, we don't live that way anymore. We have to grow our food. We have to produce our clothes, habitations, which we need because it isn't the land of eternal spring. It's not Guadalajara. And we have dangers. We have diseases. So we are tremendously invested in the physical world, thinking about it. How does it work? How does it operate? How can we gather resources and strategies to manipulate the physical world to do the things that we need it to do? So our physical necessities cause us to be tremendously invested in the physical world. That's utterly unlike it. So if you ask me, where's the balance? For us, it's 80-20, 90-10 in favor of the evil inclination, which means there's going to be a lot of failure. There's no person in the earth righteous who will do good and not fail. Failure is going to be part of the human condition. Of course, it's not unfair because in addition to being in a condition where there'll be failure, there's also ways to repair the failures. So even though there'll be failure, you could leave the world clean. You could leave the world perfect. It's just that you will go through the process of failure and you'll have to go through the process of repairing the failures. But this is very much unlike the situation of Adam in the start. Now, that's a picture of the struggles that we have, the condition of the struggle. But now what about the overall plan? The overall plan was that in making free decisions, the soul will create strength for itself. Then the free will period will pass, and then the soul will use that additional strength to purify the body. And then having purified the body, they'll go together into the world to come to be attached to God. That was the plan. Now, the soul and body are in this condition, and the soul is struggling and making some good decisions, some bad decisions. But can the struggle on this level, in this condition, strengthen the soul so much that it could take this body, this physical body, and purify it and elevate it to the point where it could become like part of the soul and attached to God? The answer is no. And the reason in part is because we have a different body. The body has become different. The body has become much more physicalized. Its ability to hide God is much greater than the body that Adam had. One little symptom of it is a statement in the rabbinic literature that Adam could see from one end of the universe to the other. With his eyes! Our eyes don't do that. Our eyes stop at the next opaque surface. So his body gave him abilities which were much more soul-like, much more transcendent than the bodies that we have. So, this is where death comes from. Death is because no matter how well you do in this world, in this life, the body that you have can't take the purification process. It can't take it. If you would apply the full strength of the soul with the purification process, this body would be incinerated. I don't know if you've had the unhappy experience of bringing here an American electric appliance and plugging it in the wall here, but if you do, it will just burn up because there's 110 and here's 220, and a 110 appliance can't take 220 electricity, as I have discovered on 3 occasions when I plugged it in and it's done. So it can't happen. So in our world, the purpose of death is that this body, in its overly physicalized existence, should be disintegrated, should be rebuilt on a pattern with Adam's original body. The soul could then be reunited with it and then apply its power to the purification process. And the process which should have happened to Adam in 1 step happens for us in 2 steps. The outcome will be the same. Outcome will be that the soul will purify the body and make it an ally of the soul and go to connection to God with the body, with the soul. But it can't be done in 1 step in this case. That's why the consequence of eating from the tree of knowledge is death. Why is that? What's the relevance of it? That's why the consequence of death is not retributive punishment, to use the words that the philosophers use. It's not that God says, you did a really lousy thing, here's a slap. No, it's not that. It's not that I'm disgusted with you and I've had it with you. No, it's that you have created a new world, and in this new world it can't be a 1-stage process because the operation of the soul on this body would simply incinerate it. So it's a 2-stage process. I want you to succeed. I'm bringing you to the world to come. Only in this case it requires 2 stages instead of 1 stage. That's the origin of the dynamics of our world, which is a result of the chait of the sin of Adam Rishon. You have a question?
Yes, sir. Was Adam,
right?
was he formed with this all this intact?
Remember, he wasn't born. He wasn't born. Adam was not born. He was made. Right. Adam had no parents. Adam had no parents. And you have to keep that in mind. And his situation was utterly different from the situation we take for granted. By the way, I'm just give you a little illustration of how this works. It's been noted, and you know it from your own experience, that, well, maybe you need some more experience. Parents love children much more than children love parents. Now, if you ask why is that, don't talk to me about prenatal development and don't talk to me about circuits in the brain. All that could be true, but that's not the source of it. The source of it is that the first people didn't have parents, but they had children. So the love experienced by the first people was only love of children, not love of parents. That's why it's more fundamental to the creation, because that's how the world started. That's the real answer. All the facets of our world are traced back to the way God created it. That's the real answer. The physical answer is just how it's accomplished, not why, not what its origin is. So here we're talking about a person created as an adult with full adult capabilities. We go through this long period of development in which we're helpless and totally physical and lacking spiritual capacities at all at the beginning, and then gradually developing them. And that means that the spiritual side is very much at a disadvantage. Okay? We're together? Okay. Now, also, we have to know that what is the relationship between the soul and the body? So We talked about the body, the soul being the source of life for the body, and the housing of the intellect, and that it purifies the body. But the soul has many components. It has many levels. In the same way that the whole world went down and the body went down, if the full strength soul would attach itself to the body and try to make a union of soul and body to make a human being to function, the body wouldn't be able to take it. Most of the soul has to be hidden. And it's just the bottom extremity of the soul that interacts with the body. The rest of it has to be kept out of contact, direct contact, because otherwise the body wouldn't be able to take it. And he brings a very interesting symptom of this. I don't know how many of you have heard that on Shabbos you have an extra soul, right? An extra measure of soul. He says, just blank, no one is aware of it. No one's aware of it. The Talmud tells us we have it, and no one is aware of it, no one feels it. And an illustration of this idea that no one feels it is a famous Talmudic statement about law. Suppose a person is on a trip through unpopulated areas, and it's hard and difficult, and he loses track of time. And he loses track of the days of the week. What day is today? What should he do about Shabbos? So here's the rule. The rule is, number one, the various biblical prohibitions about Shabbos, he should do his best to keep every day, because maybe today is Shabbos. Of course, if his life's in danger, then he can violate any of them. And if he has to get to a place where he has refuge, with his support, he can violate. But he should minimize it on every day. One day a week, he should choose to do the positive actions of Shabbos, like making Kiddush, because so it shouldn't be forgotten. He probably not getting it right, but he should still do that. Which day should he choose? There's a difference of opinion in the Talmud. One is, if you realize today, you don't know what today is, tonight. The very next day, make Kiddush. Why? Because that's the way Adam was created. Adam was created on what day of the week? Friday. So he went TGIF. He went straight into Shabbos. He went straight into Shabbos. The other opinion says, no, look at the 10 commandments, 10 pronouncements at Sinai. There it says, 6 days shall you work, and on the 7th day is Shabbos. So he should take the day that he realizes he's lost track of time as day number 1, count 6 days, and make it afterwards, right? Nobody says, just wait till you feel it. You'll know by yourself. You'll feel the inspiration, the joy. No. Either next day or 7 days. We feel Shabbos because we know what day it is and we have prepared an environment that enables us to feel it. But without that, just the bare feeling. People who were in Siberia, Queen Esther, in the palace, had 7 maids that rotated the days of the week so that she would have something that would keep track of the days of the week. She had no Jewish community, no connection with anyone. So this is something which one has to be careful. Anyway, when he says this is a proof that there are elements of the soul we're not aware of, here's something the Talmud tells us. It's open. This is not in the Zohar. It's in the Talmud. Everybody knows it, and yet we know very well that we don't have that feeling of the soul itself. We have a feeling of other things, but we don't have a feeling of the soul itself. So that being the case, we have to know that the soul is very largely out of direct contact with the body. You have a question? No? Okay. Okay. Now, it comes out according to what we said that death is a great gift. Maybe now, when you hear a midrash and you think it sounds so peculiar, it says at the end of the 6th day, God saw everything that he made, behold, it was very good. Many midrashim on that phrase, very good. One says, good is life and very good is death. You say, come on. Are you serious? Very good is death? Yeah, because without the possibility of death, in this world we'd be lost. We'd just be lost. we would never make it to the goal for which we were created. So it becomes of great benefit because we made it necessary. It would have been better if we hadn't made it necessary, but since we made it necessary, it's a tremendous benefit. Like a crutch, a person breaks his leg, you're very, very thankful for crutches. Not that you like to have crutches, but if you break your leg, they're very useful. So here, death is this great crutch, and that means death is something you could be thankful for. And by the way, this means everyone must die. You heard about Elijah going to heaven in a fiery chariot in life. He'll die also. Everyone must die. Otherwise, you'd never be able to get to Olam Haba. Yeah.
So, isn't then our complete spiritual redemption not hedged on Bechira? Because through death we're fully cleansed of all the kind of injustice, and then that's not Bechira because we're not choosing to repent there. We're just
No. It's not like that. Let me see if I can give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let me give you an example. This is an example of several things at the same time. I want you to imagine the following thing. IBM is looking for programmers to work on a special project. And they have a competition. They're taking 100 people with very good reputations. And they say to them, we have a week-long competition. The 10 winners will be hired by the company to work on this project. And here's the competition. We want you to create a program that does a certain job. Here's a computer, and it's working on these and these computing languages. We want you to create a program that does the job. And we are going to give you testing procedures, diagnostic procedures, so that you can get feedback as to how well your program is doing and where its faults are, so that you can change it and improve it. And after the week, we'll evaluate the results. So you start programming, and it goes into a loop and doesn't stop. That's not good. Infinite loops aren't good. And you try to put a check on it, and so on. Try some results. You diagnose it, only getting 60% of the right answers. So you try something else, and you keep reprogramming it. And some people's program at the end of the week doesn't work, and some do. And you are one of the lucky ones. Yours works, and you get the call on Monday morning. We're hiring you. Wonderful. So you come down, you and the 9 others, and they sit you in a room, and they say, listen, first of all, we want to tell you what happened during that week. Your programs were terrible. None of them worked. Every one of you, when you made a program, working on the program, we had a super programmer analyzing your mistakes and sending you back false diagnostics on what your program was doing so that you'd face the next problem they wanted you to face. The programs were terrible. None of them worked at all. You were just being put through the paces to see how you would respond to this problem and that problem. So don't feel, wow, I solved that problem and I made a program that works. No, you didn't. But your performance was superior, and that's why we're hiring you. Whatever we do, we don't have the power to produce results. We have the power to make an effort to make right decisions. We said this a week ago when we said you're rewarded for the effort that you put in to do the right thing. Whether you actually end up doing the right thing or not is a divine gift. You have no control over that. Control over the environment, control over the consequences, you don't have that. All you have control over is your own mind. So it's never that I'm creating it. Never that. The power of the soul to elevate the body is something that God creates in the soul. I didn't create that for myself. So always that's what's going on. So it's not the question of purifying the body. It's that the body needs to be purified by the soul, and this body can't take it. Yeah. This body is incapable of taking it. So it sets up a new body-soul relationship where free will is on a different level. It's on an entirely different level. And that free will strengthens the soul. It does. But the body can't take the purification. That's why it has to die, disintegrate, be remade into the kind of body that can take the purification. So it's not that the evil is taken out of the body. Even if you did everything right in this world, even if all the decisions were correct, it wouldn't work. Even with no evil whatsoever to apply to the body, it wouldn't work. It's not evil in the body. It's the fact that the constitution of the body is the wrong type of constitution. Teach a child how to handle, let's say, knives by giving him a blunt plastic knife and having him cut sand. Okay, it cuts, right? The spoon doesn't cut like that. This knife cuts like that and makes a straight line and so on and so on. But he's not going to injure himself with it because it's just not strong and sharp enough. Right? So we're playing with the wrong tool here to do this job.
And then in the end, the parent cuts the food for him.
Yeah. Okay, so but now what's interesting is this. Having said what I said, you could think of an alternative. This bothered me when I first was learning these things. The picture I gave you is this. In the Garden of Eden, there was one challenge, the complex challenge. Solve that challenge, do it right, your free will is over, the soul is strengthened, it operates on the body, purifies the body, and you go into the world to come. Now we're on a detour. The challenge was failed. We're now in a different condition of the world. So maybe the logical thing would be, so like you're going from A to B on the highway and you get lost on a detour and you're beating around in the bush. So first thing is get back on the highway and then complete the journey. It will be a two-stage process where somehow while you're off the highway, you're facing challenges. The result of those challenges will be to get back on the highway and then face the same challenge as you had before. That's not the plan. The plan is that the whole of the challenge has now been demoted into our world. It's been changed in qualitatively drastic ways. Also, as I said at the beginning this evening, that you have one or two, depending on how you count, human creatures, and they embody the whole of the challenge. And now we have millions and billions, slivers. Each one of us is a sliver of that original humanity. Each one of us is facing a tiny, specific challenge, and the perfection of humanity will be the sum total of crowdsourcing the job so that each one of us will have a piece of it. So the situation is a very, very different situation. And the surprise is, but that's all there is to do. It's been translated into this challenge. Once this challenge is met, returning to the Gan Eden situation and going up from there is automatic. There's no further challenge, no further possibility of loss or failure. Now, why exactly is that way, not the other way, I can't explain. I don't know why wouldn't want to make it a two-stage process, only a one-stage process, but that's the fact. That's the system as he sets it out. Yeah.
I'm not sure this answers why, but what I was thinking is kind of, I heard, not from a rabbi, so correct me if I'm wrong, that each of us has this root of our soul is in a part of Adam Rishon, and if that's true, then in a way, like we are kind of each have a sliver of rectifying that issue, like it's kind of like tikkunim sort of thing, like Gilgul, as in like we each have a part in rectifying what Adam Rishon did not accomplish.
Well, that's fine, but it doesn't answer the question.
Well, we wouldn't be able to move like Gilgulim. Like it's not like you go back and do what they didn't do. It's just simply that you accomplish one aspect of that person's life that they weren't able to accomplish.
Okay, but if you're not going back and doing what they didn't do, then the question arises, why aren't we required to go back and do what they didn't do? We should go back and do it. It didn't get done. If that was the plan of what should be done, then why shouldn't we go back and do it?
Well, that's because like originally it was one person.
Okay, so we reintegrated.
Now, so we each have a part of that.
So what? So what? Reintegrate. In fact, the reintegration, I think, is part of the Olam Haba, the world to come. Go reintegrate and go back through the same process again. Just duplicate the process. It's not obvious to me why that shouldn't be the plan. But it means that, in a certain sense, you take this world very, very seriously because here's the action. The action is here. And if you do well here, then you've played your part, and the ultimate transition will be automatic afterwards. The game's over in terms of what you do here. This doesn't lead to another challenge. I think that gives you a sense of the preciousness of the seriousness of the choices that you make here. Okay, we'll pick it up tomorrow, Mr. Hashem.